Hi there, welcome to the Lad Mix Farm channel. It's Arthur here. In today's episode, we are going to look at how goat farming is a safer venture to adapt to climate change. First, goats are highly adaptable to varying climatic conditions. Goats can thrive both in rainy season, but also prolonged dry spells, provided there is shelter. In prolonged dry spells, goats thrive basically by nibbling on grass, dry grass, but also leaves. Remember, they don't have a very big rumen, so even if there is some scarcity of pastures and grass, they're able to, get something to eat and feed well. It's unlike cattle that really need high volumes of for instance, grass to be able to eat. So if you had both goats, for instance, and cows, you notice that it is easier to feed a goat, make it satisfied, than it would be a cow. Provided actually when it is very hot, there is enough water for them to be able to drink. In fact, during the drier seasons, goats even look much healthier. You find them eating on some of these small leaves and so forth, and you find them actually even having a very shiny skin as a sign of very good health in lives of goats. The only adjustments one can do is that, for instance, during the rainy season, when the rains are high, or one only needs to do some changes, the timings on when you release the animals to go and feed. It's always advisable that during the rainy seasons, you take them out a little bit later, as opposed to take them early. Why? Because of the dew that is in the grass. You want them to be able to move out when there is less dew in the grass, so that they don't get all these infections that come with that. However, during the dry season again, it's advised to take the animals out quite early. Remember, when you take them again later, it's very hot for them and you create an unnecessary stress. But because you are sure of a very sunny day, you take them quite early so that they can feed on the grasses when they're a little bit soft, when the sun is a little bit bearable, and then they can always come maybe towards midday or 1 to kind of rest when it is very hot. So those are the few adjustments that you can make during the different times of the year, depending on whether it is very rainy or whether it is very sunny. Remember, goats, you can decide to look after them for a longer period of time. You see, there is no saying that maybe you're wasting a lot of resources. Remember, if you have grazing lands, they can just go and feed quite easily, as opposed to maybe saying that you're being caught by time and you have to sell them off. In fact, the longer you leave them out there grazing and growing, the more weight they put on and the more money you're likely to make as a farmer. This is completely different, for instance, if somebody is trying to adapt to climate change and is resulting to, let's say, crop production. Why? For crop production, you realize that having seasonal crops is a big challenge when it comes to climate change. You may plant, and then after planting your seeds, it stops raining for, let's say, 2 weeks. That means most likely that seed you've planted in ground may end up either rotting or being eaten by insects and so forth, forcing you to replant, thereby making it a very big problem for somebody engaged in crop production. But also, as people try to adapt to climate change, there has been a promotion of quick maturing crops, for instance, so that people can harvest early, which is a good thing, because also these maturing crops these crops that mature early have a tendency of yielding also quite highly. But the downside to it is that most of these varieties or crops need to be sold off sooner than later. Why? Because in most cases they don't have a longer shelf life, and therefore it affects, the returns one would make, because in most cases, if you have middlemen or people out there that like to come buy crops from different farmers, they tend to come and buy at the beginning of the harvesting season, and that's when the prices are really low. And yet for a farmer to make any difference, he needs to keep this crop a little bit, especially if it has a good shelf life, to be able to get some money, which is quite a challenge. So you can see how climate change is posing a real big challenge to farmers. So you will notice that engaging in goat farming, whether it rains heavily or less, whether there is a prolonged dry spell and so forth, as long as there is some grass for the goats to nibble on, they'll be just fine, provided they get the shelter, provided they get enough drinking water. They can move on quite well, and you'll find that the farmer will not have to go through these challenges of worrying about prolonged dry spells or too much rain and so forth. A goat will always remain a goat, and you can always feed it. So I felt this is very, very, very key, as members out there are debating on which venture to tap into. And so really, as a starter or as somebody out there, because for instance here, much as we do mixed farming, there are different ventures, there are different value chains that we're engaged in, and you will notice that we see these differences, and we have those that perform well, those that can be a better option if you are forced to zero down onto one or two things to do. So please, if you're out there, why not? Go into goat farming, you will not regret it. So if you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing. And if you're a regular, thank you so much. We are happy to receive your comments and suggestions as we try to learn from one another and improve on this farming venture that we are trying to move on together. Thank you very much.